I'm a 29-year-old woman, and I've been married to my husband Daniel for 3 years. From the outside, we look like a couple that has everything lined up the right way. We built our marriage on shared effort, real respect, and the kind of teamwork that comes from knowing we're on the same side no matter what. But the one part of our lives that never fit smoothly was his mother, Linda. From the very beginning, it was obvious she never fully welcomed me. It started small, little comments that didn't seem like much at the time. She would mention how Daniel's ex, Melissa, had always been so well put together, how she lit up the room, how successful she was in her career. Melissa and Daniel dated for 5 years before they split, and while they ended on mutual terms, Linda never seemed to accept that it was over. In her eyes, Melissa was the perfect match, the one who should have been. Daniel didn't share that view. He had no lingering feelings for Melissa. When their relationship ended, he moved on. He and I built a life together from scratch, and it wasn't a second choice for him. Still, Linda clung to the idea that Melissa was the gold standard, and she didn't hesitate to remind me of it. At first, I tried to brush it off. I figured maybe it was just nostalgia. People sometimes get attached to familiar faces. I thought if I proved myself over time, Linda would soften. But instead of fading, the digs sharpened. Whenever we attended family gatherings, she found new ways to draw Melissa back into the picture. One of her favorite tricks was forgetting to tell me that Melissa would be at family events. We would walk in, and there Melissa would be, sitting comfortably among the relatives as though she still belonged there. The first few times I told myself it was an oversight, but after the third and fourth time, it was impossible to ignore the pattern. I also noticed how Linda controlled the environment inside her home. Her walls were lined with family photos, birthdays, graduations, and holidays. There were plenty of framed shots of Daniel and Melissa together, smiling arm in arm at some family trip years ago. But there wasn't a single photo from our wedding. Not one. Daniel eventually pointed it out to her, asking why the pictures stopped at his old relationship. Linda just waved him off, claiming those were memories and she didn't see the need to replace them. Whenever I tried to insert myself into conversations at dinners, Linda found ways to redirect everything back to Melissa. If I mentioned a recent achievement, Linda quickly countered with a story about Melissa's latest promotion or some award she won. Melissa played it off as if she were embarrassed, but I couldn't miss the small smile on her face every time Linda praised her while dismissing me. Daniel tried to keep the peace, because conflict with his mother always left the entire room tense. He hated public scenes, so he often stayed polite, even when it was clear Linda was crossing a line. I didn't blame him for wanting to avoid drama, but it left me in the position of having to quietly stand my ground without ever making it obvious. The longer this went on, the more deliberate it felt. It wasn't just about clinging to the past. Linda wasn't accidentally insensitive. She was setting a tone, sending a message that Melissa was still the one she believed belonged beside her son. I caught her once, speaking in a hushed voice at the edge of a gathering, telling another relative that Melissa would always be like family. I could tell Melissa enjoyed being in the middle of it. She never directly challenged me, but she didn't need to. Her role was to smile, laugh at Linda's remarks, and let the favoritism speak for itself. Every time she walked into a room at one of Linda's events, it was like Linda was presenting her as a statement. Here is the daughter-in-law I wish I had. That's when I stopped seeing it as harmless nostalgia. It was an active campaign to undermine me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Linda wasn't going to just step back and let our marriage exist on its own terms. If I stayed quiet forever, she would keep pushing the boundaries until my place in the family was always overshadowed. But lowering myself to her level wasn't an option either. I wasn't going to play petty games or try to compete with Melissa in the way Linda wanted me to. The only path forward was to find my own way of holding firm, of making it clear without question that I wasn't going anywhere. That moment of clarity came during one of the many gatherings where Linda forgot to mention Melissa would be there again. I watched Linda beam proudly as she introduced Melissa to new acquaintances like she was still officially connected to Daniel. I stood there, not making a scene, but realizing this wasn't just a phase or a set of awkward family habits. This was a conflict that would only grow more open, more undeniable, until it reached a point where everyone had to choose what side of it they were on. I didn't know exactly how things would unfold yet, but I understood the direction. Linda wasn't going to stop. Melissa wasn't going to walk away on her own. And Daniel and I were going to have to deal with this sooner or later. That was the beginning of the battle that would define the next chapters of our marriage, when a mother-in-law decided she could rewrite the past and replace the present, and I had to show her exactly why she would never succeed. Daniel and I were invited to a family dinner at his mother's house not long after the string of tense gatherings where Melissa kept appearing. At first I thought it might be a chance for things to be more civil, a smaller setting where Linda wouldn't try to pull stunts. We arrived on time, bringing along a bottle of wine and a dessert as a gesture. The moment we walked through the front door though, the air shifted. Melissa was already sitting at the dining table, chatting comfortably with Daniel's father as if she were still part of the family. She was dressed up more than anyone else, hair done, jewelry carefully chosen, and Linda acted as though her presence was completely normal. The table was set for 8, but Melissa had been placed right next to Daniel's usual spot, almost like Linda had planned it that way deliberately. Dinner started with Linda going out of her way to loudly announce Melissa's recent promotion at work. She described it in detail, explaining how important her new role was, and kept clapping her hands together as if Melissa had won an award. Other people tried to bring up different topics. One of Daniel's siblings mentioned a school project. His father tried to talk about work, but Linda kept steering everything back to Melissa's achievements. Melissa played along with the attention, leaning closer to Daniel as she laughed at his small jokes or stories. The laugh was exaggerated, much louder than it needed to be, and Linda jumped on every opportunity to highlight how much fun Melissa always brought to the table. Each time I added to the conversation, Linda cut across my words or redirected the topic back to Melissa. It became so obvious that Daniel shifted in his chair, keeping his responses polite but noticeably shorter than usual. Halfway through the evening, I excused myself to the restroom. On the way back down the hall, I heard Linda's voice, low but clear enough. She was standing near the kitchen door with a relative, whispering that Melissa was still the one Daniel should have married. The words hit sharp, not because they were surprising, but because they confirmed what I already suspected. This wasn't about holding on to the past, it was about rewriting the present. I walked back into the dining room without showing a reaction. Melissa was leaning in again, and Linda was smiling at the sight. Daniel looked like he was forcing every ounce of patience he had left, nodding while his hands stayed tight around his glass. I sat back down, composed, and made sure not to give them the satisfaction of a scene. When the dinner finally ended, and we left the house, Daniel and I got into the car, and I told him exactly what I overheard. His jaw tightened as he started the engine, and he shook his head. He made it clear to me that he had chosen me, that there was no question about it, and that his mother's behavior was unacceptable. He promised he would deal with her directly. The next day, he called Linda. He laid out what I overheard, and how it crossed a line. Linda brushed it off immediately, claiming I was too sensitive and misheard, that Melissa was family in spirit, and that I shouldn't take it so seriously. Daniel told her it wasn't about mishearing anything. It was about respect. Linda ignored it, laughing off his frustration, and the call ended with no real acknowledgement from her side. After that, we reduced how often we visited. But Linda didn't stop her pattern. Each event we did attend, Melissa was there again, sitting comfortably like she had never left the role of daughter-in-law. It was obvious Linda was making sure of it. I quietly began keeping notes. Each incident was written down with dates and details, who was present, what was said, how Melissa was included. I didn't know exactly what I would use it for yet, but I had the sense that things were only going to escalate. At another gathering not long after, one of Daniel's cousins approached me when I was alone. She looked uneasy and admitted that Linda had been telling relatives Melissa was still basically family. The cousin said she wanted me to know because it didn't sit right with her, and she thought I deserved the truth. That moment confirmed what I already realized. This wasn't harmless clinging to the past anymore. Linda was actively working to keep Melissa in the family picture, even going as far as convincing others that she still had a rightful place. She was laying groundwork, telling a story that erased me, and replaced me with the version of Daniel's life she wanted. Meanwhile, Melissa played her part. She didn't openly confront me or say anything direct, but her presence and her smiles every time Linda praised her told the whole story. She enjoyed the favoritism, enjoyed the position Linda gave her, and had no problem sliding into it whenever Linda opened the door. Daniel noticed more each time we attended. His responses to his mother grew shorter, his patience wore thinner, and his grip on my hand at dinners was firmer. But Linda ignored every signal. She treated Melissa like the main guest of honor while brushing me aside at her own table. The dinner that started it all was just the beginning. By the time those whispers reached me through relatives, I knew the line had been crossed in full. Linda wasn't stuck in the past. She was trying to undermine my marriage in the present. And Melissa wasn't innocent. She was helping. The conflict had only just started to unfold, but the direction was clear. It wasn't going to stop here. Not long after the dinner, where I overheard Linda whispering about Melissa being the one Daniel should have married, things escalated again. Daniel and I had started reducing how often we went over, but Linda didn't let up. She was determined to keep Melissa in the picture. It was only a matter of time before she tried something bigger. That moment came when Daniel and I stopped by his parents' house one weekend to drop off some things. While we were sitting in the living room, Linda left her phone on the counter when she went into the kitchen. A notification lit up the screen. Daniel noticed the preview of a group chat, and Melissa's name was in it. The message was about plans for a family vacation. Daniel picked up the phone to hand it back when Linda returned, and that's when he saw the list of names in the chat. It included Linda, his siblings, his father, and Melissa. My name wasn't there. Daniel asked about it directly, right there in the living room. He wanted to know why his wife hadn't been included, if this was really a family vacation. Linda froze for a second, then tried to pass it off like it wasn't finalized, but the names on the list told the truth. She explained that Melissa was joining because it would be less awkward without me there. Daniel's voice was firm when he told her that if his wife wasn't invited, he wasn't going either. He stood up, and we walked out together. Later that night, Melissa sent me a text. It said, "It was nothing personal." The words dripped with smugness, and I saved the message immediately. It was proof that Melissa wasn't just passively letting Linda use her. She was in on it, enjoying every moment. I decided that instead of staying silent, I would start making sure people saw the truth without me pointing fingers or starting arguments. When we saw relatives at smaller gatherings, I calmly shared what had been happening, how I found out about the vacation, how Melissa had been invited while I was deliberately left out. I didn't rant or complain, I just told it as plainly as possible. Several relatives admitted they were already uncomfortable with Linda's behavior and didn't know how far it had gone until now. To counter what Linda was trying to paint, Daniel and I decided to host a dinner at our own home. We invited the same group of relatives who were always present at Linda's dinners. We cooked, decorated, and laid out our wedding album on the coffee table. We didn't push it on anyone, but it was there, along with photos of the trips Daniel and I had taken, the home we had built, and the life we were continuing to shape together. The difference in atmosphere was obvious. Relatives who had always seemed tense at Linda's house were relaxed in ours. They asked questions about our projects, commented on how much they loved seeing our wedding photos, and even teased us about small details in the pictures. Daniel and I worked side by side throughout the evening, refilling glasses and serving food, showing the natural rhythm we had in our partnership. Word traveled fast. Within a week, Linda called Daniel in a rage, accusing us of trying to turn the family against her. She claimed we were isolating her by not including her and Melissa at the dinner. Daniel didn't argue with her. He reminded her that Melissa wasn't his family, and if Linda wanted to act like she was, that was her choice. But he wasn't going to treat it that way. The more Linda doubled down, the more she exposed herself. At a cousin's birthday party, she made sure to arrive early with Melissa by her side. They carried in a huge gift together, wrapped in shiny paper that screamed for attention. When the present was opened, Linda clapped her hands like a proud mother while Melissa stood beside her, smiling at everyone. But the room didn't respond the way Linda wanted. Relatives politely thanked them and then turned back toward Daniel and me, asking about our plans for the upcoming holidays. Melissa tried to push further during that party. She slipped in a remark about how she and Daniel had once talked about traveling abroad together, tossing it into the middle of a conversation. The implication was clear. She wanted to remind people she had once been the one at his side. But Daniel shut it down immediately, saying his future had always been with his wife. The room fell silent for a moment, and Melissa's smile faltered. By the end of the party, it was clear the act was wearing thin. Relatives exchanged uneasy glances whenever Linda and Melissa hovered too close. Some of them came over to me quietly and said they didn't understand why Melissa kept showing up as if she were still part of things. That was the turning point. What had once been subtle digs and whispered comments was now out in the open. Everyone could see that Linda was deliberately trying to insert Melissa into places she no longer belonged. Melissa's involvement wasn't accidental. She wasn't just a guest. She was a willing partner in the performance. From then on, Daniel and I made a choice. Whenever Linda tried to exclude me or include Melissa in my place, we would confront it head-on. We wouldn't ignore it anymore or hope it passed. Each incident became part of a larger pattern, and I kept recording it in my notes. The group chats, the text from Melissa, the staged arrivals at events, all of it documented. It wasn't just about defending my place anymore. It was about making sure there was no way for Linda to twist the story and pretend it was harmless. She wanted Melissa to remain part of the family, but every time she tried, Daniel and I were there together, making it clear that her efforts only pushed her further away. By the time another cousin admitted Linda had been telling people Melissa was basically still family, I didn't even feel surprised. It confirmed what we already knew. This wasn't about memories or sentiment. It was a deliberate effort to rewrite Daniel's life in the way Linda wanted, and she wasn't going to stop unless someone forced her to. After the dinner Daniel and I hosted at our house, the shift in the family was almost immediate. Relatives who had once gone along with Linda's narrative started pulling back from it. A few cousins who used to sit close to Linda during gatherings began avoiding her side of the room, choosing instead to strike up conversations with us. Even Daniel's father, who usually stayed quiet to avoid conflict, seemed less eager to encourage Linda's stories about Melissa. For the first time, it felt like other people were starting to see what was really happening. But Linda wasn't going to let that stand. A few weeks later, she decided to host another family dinner at her place. The invitations went out, but this time she sent one only to Daniel. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere. She didn't even try to disguise it. She wanted him there alone. Daniel showed me the message on his phone, and without hesitation he responded that he would not attend any gathering that deliberately excluded his wife. He didn't argue or explain further, just refused outright. The next afternoon, there was a knock at our door. Linda was standing on the porch, visibly furious. She stormed inside without waiting to be invited, her voice raised before she even sat down. She accused Daniel of abandoning family tradition and claimed that ever since he married me, he had been distant and dismissive of his roots. Daniel let her finish, and then in front of me told her plainly that his marriage was not negotiable. If she expected him to show up anywhere without me, she was mistaken. Linda's voice sharpened. She pointed at me, declaring that I was the one who had turned Daniel against his own family. She insisted that Melissa would never have caused such division, that Melissa had always blended in easily, that the problem had only started when I came into the picture. The hostility wasn't hidden anymore. There was no polite cover, no soft excuses. It was out in the open. Not long after, Melissa began amplifying the tension. She started posting pictures of herself with Linda on social media, photos of the two of them having coffee, shopping, even captioning one with a heart emoji and the words family time. The message was obvious. She wanted everyone to believe she was still part of the circle, still the one who belonged. People who saw it showed us screenshots. Some laughed at how desperate it looked, but others were confused, unsure if Linda really meant to keep Melissa around in that role. Then something surprising happened. Daniel's younger sister reached out to me privately. She had always kept her distance from the drama, but now she apologized for their mother's behavior. She admitted she was embarrassed by it and offered me her support. That small gesture meant more than I expected. It proved that Linda didn't have full control over her children. At least one of them was starting to see through her games. The real test came during a cousin's wedding. Linda had been part of the planning committee, which meant she had some influence over the seating chart. When Daniel and I arrived, we walked over to our table only to find Linda sitting on one side of Daniel's assigned seat and Melissa on the other. There was no chair left for me. It was deliberate. The room was full of relatives watching closely to see what would happen. Daniel didn't hesitate. He walked across the room, grabbed another chair from an empty table, and carried it back himself. He placed it firmly beside him and guided me into it, sitting down with his arm resting comfortably on my shoulder, as if daring anyone to challenge it. The move silenced the room. Melissa shifted uncomfortably in her seat, trying to laugh it off, but the damage was done. Everyone saw the stunt, and everyone saw Daniel's answer to it. That moment told me more than words ever could. Linda's attempts weren't just petty anymore, they were calculated. But every calculation she made ended up showing people exactly what she was doing. The more she pushed, the more obvious it became. After the wedding, I doubled down on documenting everything. I kept a running list of Linda's remarks, her staged setups, her exclusion tactics. I added the wedding incident to the notes, describing how she placed Daniel between herself and Melissa. I had the text messages, the vacation group chat, the photos Melissa kept posting with Linda, and now the seating stunt at a family wedding. Piece by piece, the pattern was becoming undeniable. That night, when we were back home, Daniel sat me down and made something clear. From that point forward, he wasn't going to ignore any of it. If Linda tried to exclude me again, he would call it out immediately. If Melissa tried to slide into his space, he would shut it down in front of everyone. He told me the days of hoping his mother would come around on her own were over. We weren't going to pretend anymore. It was the line in the sand. We knew Linda wasn't finished, and we knew Melissa wasn't stepping back. But the next stage wasn't going to be quiet endurance. It was going to be direct confrontation, every single time. The pressure in the family had shifted. Some relatives still tried to avoid choosing sides, but many had already started leaning away from Linda. They saw the way she invited Daniel without me. They noticed the way Melissa kept inserting herself into events that weren't hers. And they saw the way Daniel handled it, without shouting, without arguing, but always with a clear message. His wife was his family, and nothing Linda did could change that. That wedding sealed it. Linda had exposed her intentions so clearly that it could no longer be brushed off as nostalgia or old habits. It was now a public campaign. But if she wanted a campaign, then she was about to face the consequences of one. After the stunt at the wedding where Daniel dragged over a chair and seated me beside him in front of everyone, Linda and Melissa both realized they had lost control of the narrative. People were starting to distance themselves from them, and for the first time, relatives openly acknowledged how uncomfortable their behavior had become. Daniel and I decided the best way to strengthen our position wasn't to fight fire with fire, but to show through action what our marriage really looked like. That's why we organized a large barbecue at our home. We invited Daniel's siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles, pretty much the entire extended family. But this time, we deliberately left Linda and Melissa off the list. It wasn't a secret, we just didn't extend the invitation. We spent days preparing, setting up tables in the yard, decorating with string lights, and putting together a menu that made sure there was plenty for everyone. When the day arrived, the event went smoothly. People ate, laughed, and complimented us on how well we worked together to host. The atmosphere was light and drama-free, something most of them weren't used to anymore. It didn't take long for word to reach Linda. The following evening, Daniel's phone rang. The second he answered, Linda's voice cut through, accusing him of deliberately trying to split the family apart. She told him that hosting a large family gathering without including her was disrespectful and divisive. Daniel calmly reminded her that she had been the one dividing the family all along by choosing Melissa over his wife, over and over again. He made it clear that the barbecue was about celebrating family without drama, and that was exactly what had happened. Linda didn't back down. She doubled down instead, insisting that Melissa was practically a daughter, and that she would always remain part of the family, whether we liked it or not. She hung up after that, but the damage control had already started. Within days, whispers began spreading. Relatives told us Linda was portraying herself as the victim, telling anyone who would listen that I had stolen Daniel from his true soulmate. According to her, Melissa and Daniel were meant to be together, and I had forced my way into his life, tearing apart what was supposed to be. The whispers didn't go far, though. Most relatives had just been at our barbecue. They had seen how happy and grounded we were together. They had eaten at our table, laughed in our yard, and felt the warmth of a couple that genuinely enjoyed hosting their family. The contrast to Linda's version of the story couldn't have been more obvious. But Linda wasn't about to let go. The next big test came at Daniel's nephew's birthday party. We arrived with a thoughtful gift wrapped neatly and ready to celebrate. Not long after, Linda and Melissa made their entrance. They were side by side, carrying a massive oversized box wrapped in shiny metallic paper with a huge bow on top. The moment they walked in, all eyes went to the giant gift. That was the point. It wasn't about the nephew at all. It was about making themselves the center of attention. Throughout the party, they hovered in conversations, trying to steer topics their way, but people drifted toward Daniel and me instead. His siblings came over to sit with us, cousins laughed with us in the corner, and even Daniel's father spent more time talking to us than to Linda. The more they tried to dominate, the more people gravitated elsewhere. At one point, Melissa leaned in close while others were within earshot and made a pointed remark about the future she and Daniel had once imagined together. It was a calculated jab, a way to remind people of their past relationship while pretending it was casual conversation. Daniel shut it down immediately. He corrected her on the spot, stating his future had always been with his wife. The room went quiet for a moment, then awkward laughter filled the space. Instead of making me seem like the outsider, Melissa ended up looking desperate, clinging to something that had ended years ago. Relatives exchanged glances after that. You could see it in their eyes. They were tired of the charade. No one was fooled anymore, and Melissa's attempts to insert herself only made her look smaller. As the party wound down and people started heading to their cars, Linda caught me in the parking lot. She stepped close, lowered her voice, and hissed that I would regret replacing Melissa. She told me that I didn't belong, that no matter how much Daniel stood by me, she would never accept it. The words were sharp, meant to intimidate. What Linda didn't realize was that I had been ready for something like this. I had my phone in my hand, and I discreetly hit record the moment she started talking. Every word came through clear. I didn't argue back. I just let her speak, saved the recording, and walked away. On the drive home, I played the audio for Daniel. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel, listening in silence until the clip ended. Then he turned to me and said it was official. If this behavior continued, we would have to consider cutting Linda out entirely. It wasn't a decision we wanted to make lightly, but her actions were leaving us with no other choice. That night marked a turning point. The barbecue had shown everyone what life looked like without Linda and Melissa's constant interference. The birthday party had shown them what desperation looked like when the spotlight was taken away. And the parking lot threat was proof, captured in her own words, of just how far Linda was willing to go. We didn't know exactly what her next move would be, but we knew one thing: the line had been crossed. From here on out, we weren't just reacting to her games, we were preparing for whatever came next. After the parking lot threat Linda made at the birthday party, Daniel and I knew things were building towards something bigger. It didn't take long before she made her next move. Word started spreading through the family that Linda had arranged what she called a family intervention. She told relatives that Daniel was being manipulated, that I had turned him against everyone, and that they all needed to sit down together to fix it. The invitation came through a cousin's phone call. It was presented like a normal dinner at a relative's house. Casual, nothing unusual. Daniel and I agreed to go, mostly because we wanted to see what Linda was trying to orchestrate this time. We knew it wasn't just going to be dinner. When we arrived, the atmosphere gave it away instantly. The table was set, but at the head sat Melissa, positioned right beside Linda. Both of them looked confident, almost smug, like they had been waiting for us. Relatives filled the seats around them, some looking tense, some pretending nothing was wrong. As soon as everyone had food in front of them, Linda stood and announced that she wanted to make something clear. She declared in front of everyone that Melissa had always been her real daughter-in-law. She said it like it was fact, like I wasn't sitting 2 chairs away. The words landed heavily across the table, making relatives glance at each other in shock. Daniel didn't hesitate. He rose from his chair, took my hand, and told the room we would not sit there and accept that kind of disrespect. The act of him physically standing with me shifted the tone. You could feel the discomfort ripple through the family. Melissa tried to take advantage of the silence. She leaned forward and claimed that she and Daniel had unfinished business. It was meant to sound mysterious, like there was some hidden truth between them. But instead of letting it hang in the air, I asked her directly what she meant. The room turned to her, waiting. Melissa faltered, her face flushed, and she stumbled over her words, unable to explain. The power of her statement evaporated the second she was asked to back it up. Relatives watched, some fidgeting with their napkins, others avoiding eye contact. For the first time, they were seeing the manipulation play out live, not whispered through Linda's side comments or hidden behind staged photos. Daniel confronted his mother openly. He told her that if she could not respect his marriage, then she would no longer be part of his life. His voice was steady, and the seriousness in it left no room for argument. Linda tried anyway. She launched into a series of stories about her sacrifices as a mother, painting herself as someone who had given up everything for her children. She wanted guilt to pull him back, but Daniel didn't move. He stood firm, repeating that respect for his wife was the only non-negotiable. The room was thick with silence after that. Relatives didn't jump in to defend Linda this time. They just sat, watching the confrontation unfold. Daniel and I gathered our things and left together, choosing not to fuel any more of the spectacle. In the days that followed, the shift became clear. Several relatives reached out privately. They apologized for not speaking up sooner, admitting they had noticed Linda's behavior but didn't want to get caught in the middle. Now, after seeing it happen in front of them, they realized it wasn't something they could ignore anymore. A few even offered to support us if Linda tried to stir up more trouble. Then one cousin revealed something we hadn't heard before. Linda had been spreading lies that Daniel and Melissa were secretly rekindling their relationship behind my back. She told relatives that our marriage was shaky and that Daniel was only staying with me out of guilt. The lie explained why Melissa acted so smug during the intervention. She thought people already believed it, but when those claims collapsed under scrutiny, when relatives saw with their own eyes how strong Daniel and I stood together, Melissa's confidence cracked. A few days later, I received a message from her. It was short, saying she wanted peace and didn't want things to be hostile anymore. The words rang hollow, especially after everything she had done to encourage Linda's campaign. By that point, the evidence we had was undeniable. I had messages saved, including the one where Melissa gloated about the vacation. I had the audio recording of Linda's parking lot threat. I had notes from every event where she excluded me or tried to elevate Melissa in my place. And now we had witnesses, relatives who had seen Linda declare Melissa her real daughter-in-law in front of the family, and who had watched Melissa flounder when asked to explain herself. Piece by piece, Linda and Melissa had built their own case against themselves. All I had done was keep track of it. As Daniel and I sat down that evening to review everything, it became clear we weren't at the beginning of the fight anymore. We were at the stage where the truth was out. The family had seen it, and we had everything we needed to confront them head-on. What Linda thought would be her strongest play, public humiliation, a staged intervention, had instead become the moment that broke her credibility in front of everyone. And Melissa's attempt to insert herself as still being part of Daniel's life only exposed her desperation. We didn't know exactly how the final confrontation would look, but we knew it was coming. And this time, it wasn't just going to be our word against Linda's stories. We had the evidence. We had the witnesses, and we were ready to put an end to it once and for all. Daniel and I knew the so-called family intervention wasn't the end of it. Linda and Melissa had both embarrassed themselves, but neither of them was going to walk away quietly. We talked it over at length and decided it was time to face them directly. No more half-truths, no more staged scenes where they tried to control the narrative. This time, we would bring everything to the table. Daniel arranged a meeting at his parents' house. He made sure word spread through the relatives so there would be witnesses. He wanted everyone to see exactly what had been happening and to hear the truth without room for Linda or Melissa to twist it later. When the day came, we arrived early, carrying a folder filled with printed messages, screenshots, and a copy of the audio recording I had made in the parking lot. Inside the house, Linda and Melissa were already seated beside each other. Linda's arms were folded, and Melissa looked overly confident, her smile wide as if she believed this was another performance she could win. The living room filled quickly as relatives arrived, sitting quietly, waiting for the confrontation to begin. Linda wasted no time. She opened with accusations, saying I had been the reason Daniel drifted away from the family, that she had tried to hold everything together but I wouldn't allow it. She framed herself as the victim, looking around the room as if expecting nods of agreement. Daniel didn't let her get far. He cut in and said the only division came from her refusal to respect his wife. Melissa tried to seize the moment, leaning forward and insisting she and Daniel still shared some kind of bond that couldn't be erased. She used the phrase unfinished bond, her eyes flicking toward the relatives to see if they were impressed. Instead of responding with words, I pulled out my phone and played the recording from the birthday party parking lot. Linda's voice came through clearly, threatening that I would regret replacing Melissa. The room went silent. The recording left no space for excuses. Daniel followed it by holding up a printout of the text Melissa had sent me after the vacation exclusion. It was nothing personal. He explained how the message came after his mother invited Melissa on a trip while deliberately leaving me out. Relatives leaned forward in their seats, murmuring to one another. Melissa's face flushed as she tried to laugh it off, but the evidence was there in black and white. Next, I laid out the sequence of events. The dinners where Linda forgot to mention Melissa would be there. The wedding seating stunt where they tried to place Daniel between the two of them. The oversized gifts at birthdays. The constant photos Melissa posted with Linda. I listed each detail without raising my voice, without adding extra drama, just the facts. Every head in the room turned toward Linda and Melissa. Several relatives spoke up at that point. A cousin said they had already suspected Linda was pushing Melissa into events, but hearing it laid out made it undeniable. An aunt admitted she felt uncomfortable for months but hadn't known how to bring it up. The tide was turning, and Linda's carefully constructed image was cracking right there in her own living room. Linda tried to backtrack. She waved her hands and said the words were misunderstood, that she only meant Melissa was like family because of how long she had known her. But her excuses rang hollow, especially after everyone had just heard her recorded threat. Melissa attempted to redirect attention back to Daniel, saying they had history, that people shouldn't erase it. Daniel looked her straight in the eye and said the past was over, and his only loyalty was to his wife. The weight of those words hit hard. Relatives shifted in their seats, some nodding in agreement. Melissa's confident facade crumbled. She muttered something under her breath and sank lower in her chair. Linda grew louder, accusing Daniel of betraying her after all she had done for him. But no one stepped in to support her this time. The silence of the room told its own story. Daniel ended it clearly. He told his mother that unless she could respect his marriage, she would no longer be part of his life. He said it in front of everyone, leaving no space for her to twist the conversation afterward. With that, he stood, and I stood with him. We walked out together, the evidence folder under my arm, leaving Linda and Melissa sitting in their own silence. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread quickly. Relatives stopped entertaining Linda's complaints. Invitations from extended family started coming, addressed to both of us as a couple, never just to Daniel. At the next family barbecue hosted by a cousin, Linda and Melissa weren't even mentioned. People gathered around us, asking about our anniversary trip, complimenting the food I brought, talking to us like the drama had finally been pushed out. Melissa disappeared from the picture not long after. Word got around that she had taken a job out of state and moved away quietly. There were no more staged photos with Linda, no more smug texts. She slipped out of the family circle without a word. Linda tried one last time. She phoned Daniel privately, hoping to bypass me, but he ended the call quickly, repeating the same boundary he had already made in front of everyone: respect his wife, or stay out of his life. After that, she stopped calling. Without Melissa as her ally, her influence collapsed. The family dynamic changed. Cousins who once stayed neutral began leaning on us to organize get-togethers. Aunts and uncles commented on how much calmer events felt without the constant tension Linda and Melissa used to bring. Our home became a gathering spot again, and Daniel and I returned to hosting, this time without the shadow of sabotage hanging over every event. For our anniversary, Daniel planned a trip just for us. We spent the week away, no family drama, no interruptions, just time together. While we were gone, relatives messaged us photos from a small gathering they held, saying it was the first one in years that had felt peaceful. The absence of Linda and Melissa was noticed, but not missed. I kept the evidence. Every message, every screenshot, the audio recording. Not because I wanted to use it again, but because it reminded me of what we had endured and overcome. The story of Linda's attempts to replace me with Melissa had reached its end, and she had lost. By the time we came back from our trip, it was clear. Linda's campaign had failed completely. She had tried to rewrite Daniel's life and cast me out of it. But instead, she ended up casting herself out. Melissa, the so-called perfect match, was gone for good. And Daniel and I were stronger than ever, surrounded by a family that finally understood where the real respect belonged.